Emotional control can be taught, and there's in some recent studies, one done by Alexandra Burt from the Michigan State University. She really looked at some previous studies and some new data into what does the development of aggressive behavior look like? How does this look like over the lifespan of a child? And what she found and highlights is really some fascinating information. One is that 65%, a majority of preschoolers, engage in some form of aggressive behavior, and that this really declines as we get older and as we get into our teen years. And then, but the severity increases from early childhood into adolescence, and this is kind of obvious. Adolescents are bigger, they hit harder, they have more access to weapons. But then it really decreases for the majority of adolescents, so that by the time we get to adulthood, most aggressive acts are being committed by a significantly small part of the population. It's actually about 5% of the population. It's almost exclusively male, and even that's a very small percentage of the male population. And so we know that we can indeed learn how to control our emotions and how to not be aggressive, which is obviously the fight part of fight, flight, or freeze. So how do we do that? What are the mechanisms that go in to learning emotional control? Looping is a term used to refer to the feedback loop which occurs in emotional contagion. I feel your emotions, my low road responds, you feel my emotions, your low road responds, and so on. We're in a loop with each other. This occurs through what are called mirror neurons, which are groups of neurons that are located in several of our brain systems, including the lower, more primal part of our brains that are responsible for our emotions, the amygdala and thalamus, again. Mirror neurons were first discovered in 1992 by a group of scientists mapping the sensory motor area in monkeys' brains, who discovered that cells in the area responsible for a given movement lit up or became active when the monkey merely observed a movement by the experimenter, which in turn made it more likely that the monkey will make a similar movement. And so they've, in addition to scientifically proving monkey see, monkey do, they also have given us some insights into what is going on in our interactions from other people and how are we learning these different things. So spindle cells also allow us to control. Spindle cells are the groups of neurons that go from our higher to our lower brain and vice versa, and they allow us to control our emotions by connecting our prefrontal cortex to our lower brain. These connections can be exercised and strengthened with practice just like any other skill, and indeed, according to some studies, neuroplasticity, the ability to learn in these areas, continues well into our 20s and beyond. Some studies even show that it goes right to our grave, allowing us to continue to learn new behavior and adapt well into adulthood. And so it raises the question again, how do we teach someone emotional control? Well, the answer is through our relationships with them. Rapport is an optimally functioning relationship. It is the basis of effective therapy and can counteract and prevent negative looping that occurs. The relationship is actually often defined as the single most important component of effective therapy. Rapport is this experience of feeling felt. It can occur between individuals or in a group. Rapport is significantly influenced by power in the relationship. So it is on the person who has the most power, or in an adult-child relationship, the adult, to kind of be putting out positive vibes, to be really paying attention to what's going on. It's all based on this I-you versus I-it feeling. So to give you an example, if I'm sitting at my computer or with my iPod and checking emails or looking at my Facebook, and my child has something really important they want to tell me, and he comes up and he, Dad, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah, what do you want? But I'm still looking at my computer screen and not paying attention to them. And he gets frustrated with that situation. That's because I'm putting out an I-it to him. I'm not really treating him as another full human being that deserves and is deserving of my full respect and attention. I'm treating him as an I-it. And so in that situation, if I were to actually stop what I was doing and turn and make eye contact, maybe even reach out and make a little physical contact with my hand on his shoulder and say, yeah, sure, what's going on? That's giving him much more of an I-you It works best when it's spontaneous. You can tell when someone is being fake with you and it doesn't feel good. However, there are some things you can do to facilitate. You can pay attention, you can be positive, you can be open and warm in your body language and your tone. All of these things will facilitate rapport. And there's this whole concept of fake it till you make it. That even if you're irritated with somebody or with your child, that you can yourself practice developing rapport and developing these skills by focusing on those skills of paying attention. I'm going to be positive. What you say to yourself inside your head about your relationship and about your interactions affect your the emotional contagion, the connection, the low road connection that goes on. So this graph depicts the effects of stress on an individual's ability to perform, learn, and function. Too little stress and we are bored and lethargic. Too much and we are overwhelmed. At some point on the downward slope towards anxiety, the brain shifts over into survival mode. At that point, no learning is taking place. It's over on the right-hand side of this graph. And an individual is simply reacting to what they see as life or self-threatening situation. Fight, flight, or freeze. Individuals who have experienced trauma or traumatic events in their life have a hypersensitive trigger for this, because their brains have been forced to deal with truly threatening situations, making it much more likely that they will perceive the new situation as a threat. We can use our relationships with another person to help them maintain an optimal level of arousal, and thus an optimal level of learning. When an individual or group is seeming down, being more energetic with them can often stimulate them to become more alert or engaged. If a child is feeling anxious and overwhelmed, we can use our relationship with them in order to help them de-escalate. This response can be reconditioned, and the ability of the individual to tolerate stress increases through corrective emotional experiences. That is, the more number of times you can put somebody over in the right-hand side of this that they are experiencing reward for positive actions, we can help them grow their emotional positive response. This happens through a trusted adults and an emotionally safe environment. We can, in effect, help children grow their spindle cells and increase their ability to control their emotions by controlling ours in the situation. By creating environments where they feel safe and are rewarded for positive behavior, as well as being held accountable for their negative behaviors in an emotionally controlled manner. That's very important. The negative feedback, repercussions, consequences should really be dealt with and delivered in a very emotionally controlled manner. We can help them to learn to control their own emotions. Children feel more confident. They try out these new behaviors when they perceive their environment as safe and predictable. So if they're feeling threatened, they might not be feeling safe enough in order to kind of try out and experiment with some of these new behaviors that we're trying to teach them. There's a guiding principle that was put out by David Walsh in a book about adolescence called Why Do They Act That Way? That neurons that fire together wire together. That really our brain's development is based on this whole concept of we use it or we lose it, and what we use actually gets stronger, and what we don't use goes away and we lose it. And you can continue to learn skills later on, but it's much easier as children are younger. So the question we have to ask ourselves is really what side of our brain do we want to be exercising? And Dennis Embry wrote an article called The Science of Peace or Violence, and he discusses how adults can either strengthen or weaken an individual's ability to control their emotions and how that affects their sense of well-being. Here we see how most of what we would consider to be dysfunctional behavior is actually a part of what Embry calls reward deficiency syndrome, or a lack of reward. Through a lack of positive reward and input or a consistently threatening environment, a child's ability to produce the neurotransmitters responsible for pleasure and well-being, dopamine and serotonin, are diminished. Drugs, alcohol, sex, and violence are the likely end result of these individuals' search for something to replace the rewards that just aren't there. Drugs and alcohol can supply dopamine, but they also reduce the brain's ability to produce it through naturally rewarding situations. Violence and aggression have a calming afterglow as the body tries to recover or rebalance itself from a stressed state. And this increased drive for sex is an interesting one and really makes genetic sense. A gene's goal is to reproduce. If the organism is experiencing what it perceives as self-threatening stress, it will gear up to reproduce itself even more in an attempt to preserve itself.